In this instance, he thinks brown immigrants are dangerous, right? So if we're operating on that premise, then he
can speak English or Spanish.
Who cares?
Well,
that doesn't mean you're an illegal immigrant. It doesn't mean you're dangerous.
It was a mistake that happened, and he was out.
Republicans, I mean, technically, I mean, not to throw shade, but to throw shade, y'all hit y'all whole party to a felon.
I'll tell you why it's a bad affiliation. Because it's a bad affiliation because a lot of Americans get the sense that Democrats care more about illegal immigrants than American citizens, right?
We are walking the streets, and if somebody who looks like us can be picked up walking the streets for no reason, no justification, no due process, we should care about that more than...
I've been dying to actually have this conversation with all people of color, so I'm gonna do it right now.
Let's do it.
We know how these things play out in America, and we know why due process is actually so important, particularly for people of color.
Hello, everybody. Guys, let's get right into this panel. These two MAGA pundits will just not critique the clear and obvious racism, and I wanted to share a personal experience I had with racism. It was years ago that I don't believe I've ever told anyone, and I think it's worth for clarification. But let's get into this panel, and I'll talk about that later.
More evidence that MAGA thinks the optics are in its favor, though, is this post from the White House scrawling over a New York Times headline and making a promise about Abrego Garcia's future. He's not coming back. Criminal defense attorney Dante Mills joins us in our fifth seat. Now, Dante, if you're an attorney and you have to defend this White House's position in court, and the White House's social media interns just posted what they posted, do you worry then that you've just posted for the world to see a willful disregard of a court order to facilitate this guy's return?
Well, I guess it depends on who you are. I mean, if you are the White House, you don't care. They've shown that. It really doesn't matter to them. They have no plans on following the rule of law, and that's a huge problem, and we just have to break that down as to why. Law provides stability. You need to know what you can and cannot do. And if you don't, if we're operating outside of the law and just based on Trump's opinion of who people are, and in this instance, he thinks brown immigrants are dangerous, right? So if we're operating on that premise, then he can decide what happens to those people if they're shipped away to a prison in El Salvador, if they're put on planes without any due process where they say they didn't meet anything that requires them to be deported or violated the law, but he has this opinion of them, and that's all that matters.
I think it's really, one thing I think is super interesting is that they've been calling him a terrorist and an MS-13 gang member. They moved him out of the prison for terrorists and gang members. Why? I mean, it seems to kind of indicate that maybe they realize that they are not going to be able to support those allegations.
Well, not just that. If you have to create fake propaganda, that means that you don't believe your story. So it's an old adage, you ain't got to lie to kick it. And it seems like they are more than happy to lie to kick it. And I think they know the way this country processes information, that narratives sell. So if they can sell the narrative to you that this is a dangerous person, that margaritas and sipping by the, and then by the pool, as he said, that the fact that they want to stage this, I'm like, if you really can stand 10 toes down that this man is dangerous, he doesn't belong in this country, why you need to do the extra? Mm-hmm. You don't.
I do think, though, that there is a real question about the politics of this and the optics of this, because it is very easy, and I think a lot of people, you were making this point, a lot of people would say, well, why do y'all care so much about this guy? And they are saying that. Is it risky politically for Van Hollen to literally go to another country to make this point for someone who, at best, perhaps has a checkered past?
Look, if you are solely in the business of working in politics to be the person who wins the campaign and not actually care about the outcomes of our laws and the impact of the American people, then maybe it's not the best conversation to be having right now, because people did vote on November 5th around immigration and the economy. I think there were other reasons why Donald Trump won, but we do know that immigration was a big issue. But I hope that people are in politics for something bigger than just Republicans winning or Democrats losing or vice versa. I hope they're in it because they respect the Constitution, they respect our institutions, and that America should try and live up to its greatest ideals. And I think that is why Democrats are paying such close attention. So today it's Garcia, tomorrow it could be fill in the blank, who is an American citizen. And if this
in Florida.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the possibility of this happening and happening at an expedited clip, if you don't say no to even the thing that doesn't have the best political packaging, makes our Constitution so much weaker.
I think we have to bring that part up. In Florida,
And exactly, I don't believe it's unpopular because of polls show, depending on how you question it. But regardless, if it was unpopular, guys, it was once unpopular to fight back against segregation and Jim Crow and slavery until it wasn't. You don't wait something like this out. These people are targeting black people. They're targeting brown people in this case. You don't wait something out like racism and bigotry and cruelty. Do you think if Martin Luther King was here with us today that he would just say, hey guys, let's wait this one out? It'll go away if we just stop talking about it. Right? Let's just sit on a bench and wait it out. No, he fought and ultimately lost his life for the cause. I think it's all of our duty to keep his fight and this fight in general going.
Happened where an American citizen was arrested. The charges were dropped, but because the arresting officer determined that he was an illegal immigrant, when those charges were dropped, the criminal judge couldn't release him. He had to be held in jail until he was processed through ICE, despite the fact that his mom is in court showing his birth certificate, his social security card, but he was determined to be an illegal immigrant, and he was an American citizen.
Yeah, because perhaps he spoke a Mayan language, not English as his first language. You know, this is what, this conversation is happening, I think, in liberal circles right now. Here's what the Pod Saves folks, this is Dan Pfeiffer, talking about, I guess, what some Democrats want to see from their electeds on this issue.
Democrats look cowardly, calculating, and ridiculous if our response to the father and husband of a U.S. citizen being sent illegally in defiance of the Supreme Court order to a foreign gulag is to vomit up some poll-tested talking points about tariffs, to turn our back to it. Like, that is absurd. Like, who are we and what do we stand for if we do that? Democrats are learning the wrong lesson from 2024. We did not lose on immigration because we talked about people like Kilmar Abrego Garcia too much. We lost because we ceded the issue to Donald Trump.
It could be that a lot of Americans will at some point look at this and say, why don't they just follow the law? Why are they fighting so much to send this guy, you know, to El Salvador when they could just bring him back and then deport him lawfully?
I wish that the administration had actually done that from the beginning, and fine, I say bring them back and ship them off again. You started talking about the optics. Now, Bukele doing his thing, I don't like that at all. But Donald Trump, you're right, immigration and the economy. If you look at where Donald Trump is still doing well, it is on the issue of immigration. Politically, this is a win for Republicans and Donald Trump. Politically, optics-wise, it is not a good win for Democrats because Republicans will be able to use this next year. And this is after Democrats throughout the Biden administration, even starting at the beginning of the Biden administration, where they decided that there was not even a crisis at the border. So Donald Trump has a lot of room here, and I think that the American people will give him a lot of room because we're talking about criminals. We're talking about people who don't have the right to be here. That is a much different...
Sometimes we're talking about criminals. But sometimes we're not talking about criminals, which I think is the problem.
Yeah, but that's nuance that most of you talk about. You remember you said narrative?
Narrative,
most people won't look at the narrative.
Okay, so Malik, can I ask you a question though? All right, so if the right is selling this narrative that, you know, we don't want criminals to be here, and understand that, especially if they've committed crimes obviously on American soil. But can you sell that this is a bad affiliation for Democrats when the Republicans, I mean, technically, I mean, not to throw shade, but to throw shade, y'all hitch y'all whole party to a felon.
I'll tell you why it's a bad affiliation. Because it's a bad affiliation because a lot of Americans get the sense that Democrats care more about illegal immigrants than American citizens, right? There's been 5 actual American citizens held hostage in Gaza for the past 18 months. Most Democrats don't even know their names. And yet, this guy, you know, his name is on every Democrat's lips right now. So people get the sense that there's this heightened concern, this making a martyr out of people you shouldn't make a martyr out of.
No, that's not. So we're not going to Gaza, right? Where we're concerned about, are we going to be picked up in Gaza and held? But we are walking the streets. And if somebody who looks like us can be picked up walking the streets for no reason, no justification, no due process, we should care about that more than if we're in Gaza, whether we can be picked up in Gaza. So I don't think this is a red herring issue where you can say, why is America concerned about these illegal immigrants? Because we're showing, and they're showing, that this is trickling to American citizens. And now American citizens have the right to be afraid that they're going to get the same kind of treatment.
Because he didn't speak English or Spanish.
Who cares?
Well,
that doesn't
I'm
mean you're
saying
an
that
illegal immigrant. It doesn't mean you're dangerous.
It was a mistake that happened, and he was out
because he filled out a form. He filled out the form that was earlier. He was in Mexico from 2 to 16 years of age, and he filled out some form, and it alluded to the fact that he wasn't actually a citizen. They had to produce his birth certificate. But
we're talking about the case of the American in
right,
Florida.
yeah, the one in Florida.
I just want to make sure everybody's clear.
I just wanted to put this out there on the issue of, care, concern. To piggyback off of what you were saying, there seems to be more energy for Democrats to support these illegal immigrants than, for instance, Chris Van Hollen and I believe Cory Booker. Both of them, neither one of them voted for the Laken Riley Act. So if you're concerned about Americans, American citizens, those who were killed by these illegals, then you would have voted for the Laken Riley Act. They didn't. They went to El Salvador.
I think what happened to Laken Riley is awful and is terrible. And I think that the person who killed Laken Riley should go to jail just as they are. But the Laken Riley Act, the reason why they did not vote for them is the same reason why Democrats are making their case right now, is because the law was vacant of due process. That is what makes America the shining city on the hill. And so it just is. I've been dying to actually have this conversation with all people of color, so I'm going to do it right now.
Let's do it.
We know how these things play out in America, and we know why due process is actually so important, particularly for people of color, because it gives us that we didn't have due process always in this country. And so at some point, people who looked like all of us sitting at the table would be stopped. And when the judge decided they were done with the case, they were. But due process allowed us to have a whole thing, what allowed us to have a jury of our peers. And that is what we are fighting for. It is not, I actually am not saying Garcia should not be deported. I'm saying that I want him to have the same due process that the Constitution affords everyone.
Isn't over, and I have to say.
And I was trying to leave my comments for mostly the end, but I just have to interrupt here. Coleman Hughes and Malik, they just will not critique it. And I just don't understand how they can stand. This might be definitely the most racist modern president we've ever had. How do they go to bed at night with these talking points? And the reason that they care about this more, and especially people of color, is because you have to be nonsensical buffoons or bootlickers like these two, not able to see that this is not going to only affect Hispanics, but it's going to be any person of color. And then it's going to branch off even more from there. They demonize, I've said this before, they demonize groups, different groups in just different ways. All attacks in just different angles of attacks. Arabs, they're terrorists. Black people in the new attack with this whole DEI garbage. And the high level positions, they don't deserve them. Hispanics are violent. When the facts are against them on all of these things. And the next obvious step, Trump has already talked about this multiple times, that he wants to deport American citizens. Now, who do you think those people will be? Better question, what skin color do you think they will be? Coleman Hughes and Malik. Like, to these two, 1 + 1 = question mark. I don't know. Let's see where this goes.
Listen, even let me speak to Carmelo Anthony right now. He should be afforded due process. Carmelo Anthony, you don't have to be afraid to go to court, to make it to court. You have the right to defend yourself.
You're talking
we have
about
to have that.
He's the young man who was charged.
Yeah, absolutely. Who's now
talking about the basketball stuff.
Now his family is being attacked. They're being threatened to even make it to court so he can put up a defense.
Yeah.
I'm not saying whether he was right or wrong, but we got you. We're going to back you in the process because you're old that process.
Let me ask Coleman to respond to what Ashley just said about.
I thought the same thing when I first saw it. I thought they were talking about Carmelo Anthony, the basketball player.
the due process and the particular sensitivity that people of color have to that. Do you agree with that
I completely
premise?
agree. I think due process is incredibly important. It's more than just words on a page. It's more than a political football. It's what ensures we have the rule of law rather than the rule of whatever the heck the people in power want. So I completely agree with you about that. The question is whether is this good politics for the Democrats? I would say right now you've got two issues. You've got immigration, where people basically agree with Trump, and you've got the economy, which Trump is destroying. And he's hemorrhaging people in the middle. So I'd say focus on your winning issue.
All right, we'll leave it there for that conversation. Dante, thank you.
That's the most critique you'll ever see come from him. They will never be direct enough. I mean, I just don't get it. But let me give you my spiel here, guys, and the anecdotal experience that I had. And I want to be clear, as I've done in the past. This issue of racism and bigotry, to me, personally, is the most important issue. Most of my videos are about this. That's obviously purposeful. And no matter how mentally exhausting it is for me and how frustrating it could be, I think as much as possible, appropriately possible, when these topics are brought up, is to push back. Because in my beliefs, this stuff is spreading like a contagious virus, like a plague sickening the population. And I fight back especially against racism against towards black people, which to me is just truly heart-wrenching. Guys, it's been 400 years and the flames of racism still persist today. And I'm a math guy, right? I've said this before, I'm a numbers guy. And I don't think most people can truly comprehend what 400 years actually is. Do you understand what that does to generation after generation after generation? And in fact, I think it's getting worse now. And it's why I speak about uniting. It's more important than ever. We will truly regret the day we didn't come together on this issue. And as an Hispanic, I think it's abhorrent. 45% of us voted for a guy who is now shaving out people's heads, making videos of us, humiliating us in cages, and treating us as if we was like some kind of animal or a different species. And if you think that these people that are doing these to Hispanics see legal American citizens, Hispanic citizens, any differently, you're sadly mistaken. This includes you, Hispanic Trump supporters. In fact, they see you as useful idiots to the disgusting cause. And if you're Hispanic and see racism against black people and vice versa, you must understand that this racism is towards you too. They see us all the same. We're a subgroup to them. And so let me share you this anecdotal experience where I was working at this company years ago. There was this older white woman coworker, and every morning we would have a quick chit chat, very cordial. And I always was quiet, kind of kept to myself. I've always been this way my entire life. And a close coworker of mine told me that one day when I went to the bathroom, that she said that he's so quiet, I fear one day that he will come up and blow up the office. Keep in mind, she knew completely that I was Hispanic. But it made me, so think about what she was doing. She was making obviously a disgusting racist comment, but as if I was Arab. And I've been mistaken for Arab, but she knew I was Spanish. And I guess what was shocking is that I knew racism existed against black people, against Hispanic people, against Arabs. But I almost saw it as separate battles. When in fact, these people see us all the same. And I've said this before. If you're a type of person that has a negative view or don't like black people, you obviously won't like Arabs or Hispanics either. And it's insane to think otherwise. And I know it's just one experience, but it truly opened my eyes to see that in their eyes, we're all the same. Not that it should matter, but in their eyes, we're all the same. Whether you're Hispanic, black, Arab, it doesn't matter. They're coming after all of us. This is like an ideology for these people. It's almost like a religion in which we aren't a part of it. And instead it teaches that we are the enemy and we're to be feared. And I believe racism is the source, is the roots of any form of bigotry. And I think that's how it's easy to branch off into misogyny, hatred against gays, trans people, women in the workplace, different religions. It's easy to branch off that because, again, I've said this before 1,000 times. It's my belief that if you can have such a disdain for a group of people and think of them as subhuman, literally because of their skin color, it won't be difficult to have these same people to hate women in the workplace, gays or trans having equal rights, as it opens the door up for all forms of mistreatment just because you're different one way or another. And I know I've said a lot of these things before, but I think a lot of these things are worth repeating as much as possible. But I'm going to leave it there. I'm losing my breath. Let me know what you think in the comments. I don't really like talking about myself a lot. That's why I don't. But I thought sharing that story would be clarifying for some. But let me know what you think in the comments. I try to read just about all of them. Please like the video. It really helps. Please subscribe. That helps too. And I'll catch you in the next one.